Every theological tradition for 2,000 years has taught you that when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, in Luke 17:21, he was speaking metaphorically. A beautiful spiritual sentiment about God's presence in your heart. Internal righteousness versus external ritual. A poetic way of saying heaven is a state of consciousness, not just a future destination. But the Gnostic practitioners who received direct transmission from Jesus, who were given the mysteries reserved for the inner circle, who understood the cosmological framework he was operating from, interpreted those exact words in a completely different way. They recognized what Jesus was actually doing in that moment. He was not offering comfort or poetic guidance. He was providing coordinates, precise location data for accessing the monad, the infinite source consciousness, the one from which all emanation flows, directly and immediately without needing to die, without institutional permission, without ascending through the archonic heavens the demiurge constructed to trap souls in the reincarnation cycle. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, preserves this teaching in its most unambiguous form, saying 3 records, Jesus explicitly correcting the externalized version of the kingdom. If your leaders say to you, "Look, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, "It is in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside you and it is outside you. This is not poetry. This is technical instruction. Jesus is dismantling the entire framework of heaven as reward, as destination, as something you access later if you behave correctly now. And he continues in the same saying, "When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you dwell in poverty, and you are that poverty." What I'm going to show you over the next 2 hours is not another interpretation of this teaching. It is the actual practice Jesus transmitted to the Gnostic initiates, the precise internal method for recognizing the monad as your own fundamental consciousness, not as belief system, not as meditation technique you perform hoping for results, as direct recognition of what you already are when you stop identifying with everything you are not. You will learn the specific steps Gnostic practitioners used to shift identification from body-mind to awareness itself. You will understand why the Church had to suppress this teaching to maintain institutional control. You will receive the historical lineage connecting Jesus' instruction to mystery school practices spanning Egypt, Greece, Persia, and India. And you will be able to verify every claim I make through your own direct experience, because the kingdom Jesus described is not somewhere else. It is the ground of your own consciousness right now. The destination is not your heart, not your soul, not some abstract spiritual essence the Church can redefine however it needs to maintain control. The destination is your consciousness itself, the awareness reading these words in this moment, the I am presence that has been here every moment of your life, witnessing thoughts, witnessing emotions, witnessing the body but never actually being any of those things. That awareness is not inside you. You, the body, the personality, the ego structure are inside it. And that awareness is where the monad has always been, not distant, not in some heaven you access after death if you obeyed correct doctrines. Here, now, closer than your breath, closer than your heartbeat, so close that you have been looking past it your entire life because you were taught to search for God outside yourself. This is what Jesus revealed to the chosen ones, and this is exactly why the Church had to rewrite it. Because if the kingdom of heaven is not a place you go after you die, if it is a state of consciousness you access right now by shifting your identification from body to the awareness witnessing the body, then what power does religion have? None. If you do not need to earn your way into heaven through obedience, ritual, and institutional approval, what leverage does the Church hold over you? None. If the monad is not somewhere else, but is the ground of your own consciousness, accessible any moment you stop identifying with thoughts and recognize the awareness those thoughts appear in, then the entire system of external salvation collapses. So they turned within you into a metaphor. They made it safe, vague, inspirational, but not operational. The Gnostics never forgot what it actually meant. The Valentinian school, founded by Valentinus in Alexandria around 140 CE, taught a specific practice they called gnosis of the heart, which had nothing to do with emotional knowing. It was recognition practice, direct looking at the consciousness that looks. The Sethian Gnostics, whose texts like the Apocryphon of John and the three steles of Seth were buried at Nag Hammadi, preserved techniques for what they called standing in the pleroma while still embodied. The Narsini Gnostics, described by Hippolytus in his Refutation of All Heresies around 230 CE, taught that the kingdom Jesus spoke of was the primordial human consciousness that exists before and beyond individual incarnation. Different terminology, same practice, recognition of awareness as the monad itself. Before we go deeper into the historical evidence and the specific practice, I need you to understand what made this teaching so dangerous to institutional religion that it had to be systematically suppressed. The problem was not heresy in the abstract. The problem was power. The early church fathers, Irenaeus in particular in his Against Heresies written around 180 CE, understood exactly what the Gnostic teaching implied. If individual consciousness can access the divine directly without mediation, without sacraments, without bishops, without the authority structure that controls who receives grace and who does not, then the entire edifice of church power becomes unnecessary. Irenaeus's criticism of the Valentinians reveals this perfectly. He writes, "They claim that they have a knowledge superior to others and that they alone have imbibed the greatness of the knowledge of that unspeakable power. They represent themselves as being above all necessities, as being superior to every power, as being obliged to keep none of the appointed disciplines, as being free to do whatever they want." Read between the lines. The problem is not incorrect doctrine. The problem is that they claim direct access to the divine without needing church authority. They represent themselves as being above the appointed disciplines, the sacramental system, the power structure. That is the threat. The monad location code Jesus gave is dangerous because it makes every individual a direct access point to source consciousness. It eliminates the middleman. It dissolves the hierarchy. It reveals that you do not need to be saved because you are never actually lost. You only forgot what you are. And remembering is not a process that requires institutional approval. It is recognition that happens in a single moment when you stop looking outward and start looking at the awareness that is looking. Let me show you what this recognition actually looks like in practice. Then we will trace the historical lineage that preserved this teaching through 2 millennia of suppression. Then we'll break down the precise steps you can use to access this recognition yourself, starting today. Right now, as you are reading or listening to these words, there is an awareness present. You are aware of the words. You are aware of the meaning those words convey. You are aware of thoughts appearing in response to those words. You are aware of the room you're in, sounds around you, sensations in your body. All of that awareness is completely obvious. You've been aware your entire life. But here is what the Gnostic practice reveals. You have never once actually looked at the awareness itself. You have always been looking at the contents of awareness, thoughts, emotions, perceptions, sensations. But the awareness those contents appear in has been completely overlooked. The practice Jesus taught is to reverse that. Stop looking at contents. Start looking at the awareness, not thinking about awareness, not developing a concept of awareness, actually placing attention on the awareness that is here right now. And when you do that, something immediately becomes obvious that changes everything. The awareness has no boundaries. You cannot find where it begins or ends. You cannot find where it is located. It is not in your head, even though thoughts appear there. It is not in your body, even though sensations appear there. The awareness itself is not located anywhere in space because it is not a thing. It is the space in which all things appear, not physical space, conscious space, the infinite openness in which the entire manifest world arises, including the body you think you are. The Gnostic texts describe this recognition with remarkable precision. The Gospel of Philip, another Nag Hammadi text dated to the 3rd century, but containing material from the 2nd century Valentinian tradition, states, "Light and darkness, life and death, right and left, are brothers of one another. They are inseparable. Because of this, neither are the good good, nor the evil evil, nor is life life, nor death death. For this reason each one will dissolve into its original nature, but those who are exalted above the world are indissoluble, eternal." This is describing the shift in identification. When you identify with the body-mind, you are subject to all the dualities, all the opposites, all the conditions of material existence. When you recognize yourself as the awareness those conditions appear in, you are exalted above the world. Not because you leave the world, but because you recognize you are never actually in it the way you thought you were. The awareness is not born when the body is born. It does not die when the body dies. It is the eternal background against which birth and death appear. The Secret Book of John, one of the most important Sethian texts found at Nag Hammadi, preserves a teaching session where John asked the risen Christ about the nature of the divine realm. Christ responds, "The monad is a monarchy with nothing above it. It is he who exists as God and Father of everything, the invisible one who is above everything, who exists as incorruption, which is in the pure light into which no eye can look. He is the invisible spirit of whom it is not right to think of him as a god, or something similar. For he is more than a god, since there is nothing above him, for no one lords it over him." Then Christ continues with the crucial teaching. Since everything exists within him, he has no need of anything, for he is totally perfect light. He is immeasurable, since there is no one before him to measure him. This description is not theology, it is phenomenology. When you look at awareness itself, you discover it has no boundaries, no limits, no measurements. There is nothing outside it that could measure it or contain it. And everything you have ever experienced, every thought, every emotion, every perception, every moment of every lifetime exists within it. The awareness is not your personal consciousness. Your personal consciousness is a temporary expression of it, the monad recognizing itself through the lens of individual experience. Now here is where the practice gets specific, where we move from philosophy to technique. The Gnostics did not just talk about this recognition, they developed precise methods for actualizing it. The core practice comes from the Valentinian tradition and is preserved in fragments from Valentinus himself, from his student Ptolemy, and from the Gospel of Truth, a Valentinian text found at Nag Hammadi. The practice has 3 movements, and each movement is designed to break a specific identification that keeps consciousness trapped in the illusion of separation from the monad. Movement 1 is called witnessing the witness. You sit in a comfortable position, close your eyes, and you simply notice that you are aware. Notice thoughts appearing. Notice the space those thoughts appear in. Notice that you're not the thoughts because you're the awareness those thoughts are appearing to. Notice emotions, sensations, mental images, memories, plans. Notice that all of it is appearing in awareness, and notice that the awareness itself is not any of those things. It is what they appear to. This first movement establishes the basic discrimination between awareness and contents of awareness. You are not what you are aware of. You are the awareness itself. Most meditation practices stop here. They teach you to rest as the witness, as the observer of experience. But the Gnostic practice goes deeper because resting as witness still maintains subtle duality. There is still you witnessing experience. The second movement dissolves that. It is called collapsing the witness. Once you have established yourself as awareness witnessing contents, you turn attention back on itself. You ask, what is aware of the awareness? Not conceptually, you actually look. What is aware that you are aware? And when you look for the awareness of awareness, you discover something shocking. There is no second awareness looking at the first awareness. There is only awareness. The witness and the witnessed collapse into a single, seamless field of knowing. There is no you watching experience. There is only experiencing happening. No subject observing objects. Only the seamless appearance of objects in objectless awareness. The gospel of truth describes this collapse. He who has knowledge knows where he came from and where he is going. He knows as one who, having become drunk, has turned from his drunkenness and, having come to himself, has restored what is his own. The drunkenness is identification with thought, with body, with the individual self. Coming to yourself is recognizing that the one who's aware was never actually the individual. The individual is what appears in awareness. Awareness itself has no individual characteristics. It is the infinite, impersonal, eternal monad knowing itself. The third movement is the most radical. It is called recognizing the ground. Once the witness has collapsed, once there is no longer a separate you observing experience, you investigate the nature of the awareness itself, not by thinking about it, by resting in it and allowing its nature to reveal itself. And what reveals itself is that awareness is not empty neutrality. It is not blank nothingness. It is vibrant, alive, intelligent, creative, blissful, and it is the source from which all manifest reality emanates. The Scythian texts call this the living silence. The Valentinians call it the depth, or bythos. The Corpus Hermeticum calls it the mind of the Father. It is the monad, not as concept, as lived recognition. You're not in the monad. You are the monad recognizing itself through temporary limitation as individual consciousness. Ptolemy, writing to Flora around 160 CE, describes this recognition with precision. There is a perfect God who is neither beginning nor end, the Father and root of all things, in whom the universe exists as seminal principle. The universe exists in God as seminal principle. Not that God created the universe and it exists outside him. The universe exists within the infinite awareness that is God's nature, and your awareness right now is not separate from that. It is that. The monad has never stopped being what you are. You have only been identified with a temporary expression of it and forgotten the ground. Now let me trace the historical lineage that preserved this teaching. This is not speculation. We can document the transmission of this practice through specific teachers, specific texts, specific communities across 2,000 years. The chain begins with Jesus and the inner circle. The Gospel of Thomas records that Jesus gave esoteric teaching to Thomas, James, and the other close disciples that was not given publicly. Saying 13 preserves this. Jesus said to his disciples, "Compare me to something and tell me what I am like." Simon Peter said to him, "You are like a righteous angel." Matthew said to him, "You are like a wise philosopher." Thomas said to him, "Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like." Jesus said, "I am not your master. Because you have drunk, you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out." And he took him and withdrew, and told him 3 things. When Thomas returned to his companions, they asked him, "What did Jesus say to you?" Thomas said to them, "If I tell you one of the things which he told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. A fire will come out of the stones and burn you up." Those 3 things Jesus told Thomas were the core Gnostic teachings, and one of them was certainly the recognition practice I just described, because that practice appears consistently in every Gnostic text we have recovered. From Thomas, the teaching passed to the Syrian and Egyptian Gnostic communities. Valentinus, who was teaching in Alexandria by 140 CE, received transmission through a chain that went back to Paul's student Theudas, according to Clement of Alexandria. Valentinus then taught Ptolemy, Heraclian and Marcus, who spread the Valentinian school throughout the Roman Empire. The Scythian tradition developed in parallel, likely coming directly from disciples of Jesus through John. The Apocryphon of John claims to record secret teaching John received from the risen Christ after the crucifixion. By the 3rd century, you have thriving Gnostic communities across North Africa, the Middle East, and Southern Europe, all practicing variations of this recognition technique. Then the suppression begins. In 325 CE, Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea, which establishes Orthodox Christianity as state religion and begins the systematic persecution of alternative traditions. Gnostic texts are burned, teachers are exiled or killed, communities are disbanded, but the teaching does not die, it goes underground. In the 4th century, monks in Egypt bury the Nag Hammadi library, preserving 52 Gnostic texts that would not be discovered again until 1945. The recognition practice appears in Christian mysticism through figures like Evagrius Ponticus, who taught pure prayer as objectless awareness in the late 4th century, and later through Meister Eckhart in the 14th century, who described the ground of the soul as identical with the ground of God. The practice surfaces in Islamic mysticism through Sufis like Mansur al-Hallaj, who was executed in 922 CE for declaring "I am the truth," meaning he recognized his essential nature as identical with divine reality. It appears in Jewish mysticism through Kabbalistic practices of cleaving to the Ein Sof, the infinite. It appears in Hindu Advaita Vedanta through teachers like Adi Shankara in the 8th century, who taught that Atman, individual consciousness, is identical with Brahman, universal consciousness. The same teaching, the same practice, preserved across cultures, across religions, across centuries, because it is not cultural, it is not belief-based, it is recognition of something that is always true. Awareness is the monad, and the monad is what you are when you stop identifying with what you are not. In the modern era, we can trace the practice through specific lineages. The Advaita teacher Ramana Maharshi, teaching in Tamil Nadu from 1896 to 1950, taught self-inquiry, which is asking "Who am I?" and tracing attention back to the I sense, which reveals itself as infinite awareness. Nisargadatta Maharaj, teaching in Mumbai from the 1930s to 1981, taught "I am" meditation, resting in the sense of being prior to identification with thought or body. These teachers never read the Gnostic texts. They were not trying to preserve ancient Christianity. They simply discovered the same recognition through direct practice. And that brings us to why this matters for you right now. The teaching is not historical curiosity. It is not spiritual trivia. It is functional technique for recognizing what you are, which dissolves the entire structure of suffering, seeking, and separation that defines normal human experience. Let me break down exactly how to practice this, what obstacles you will encounter, and how to work with them. The practice begins with basic awareness training. You need to develop the capacity to distinguish between thoughts and the awareness thoughts appear in. Most people have never done this. They have spent their entire lives completely identified with thought, believing they are the voice in their head. So step 1 is sitting practice. Set aside 20 minutes. Sit in a comfortable position where you can remain alert. Close your eyes and simply notice that thoughts are appearing. Do not try to stop thoughts. Do not try to control thoughts. Just notice them. There is a thought about what I need to do later. There is a thought about whether I'm doing this correctly. There is a thought about something that happened earlier. Notice that thoughts come and go. They appear and disappear. And notice that something is aware of those thoughts. Some awareness is here, witnessing the thoughts, but not itself being those thoughts. This is the basic insight. You are not your thoughts. You are what is aware of your thoughts. Do this for 20 minutes a day for a week, just noticing thoughts, noticing the space they appear in, noticing that you are the space, not the thoughts. You will encounter resistance. Thoughts will say, "This is boring, this is not working, I should be doing something else, this is stupid." Notice those thoughts too. They are just more content appearing in awareness. Do not fight them. Do not believe them. Just notice them. After a week of this basic practice, you move to the second stage, investigating the awareness. Once you can consistently recognize that you are awareness, not thoughts, you start to explore what awareness actually is. In your sitting practice, after you have settled into witnessing thoughts, ask, what is this awareness? Where is it located? What are its characteristics? And then do not answer with thought. Actually look. Place attention on the awareness itself, not on any object appearing in awareness. And notice what becomes obvious. The awareness has no location. It is not in your head. Thoughts appear in your head, but the awareness of thoughts is not located there. It is not in your body. Sensations appear in your body, but the awareness of sensations is not limited to the body's boundaries. The awareness is spacious, open, without edges or limits. This is where most people hit the first major obstacle. The mind will try to conceptualize awareness. It will create a mental image of infinite space or cosmic consciousness. Do not let it. You're not trying to imagine awareness. You're trying to recognize the awareness that is already here. The awareness that is reading these words right now. Not a concept of awareness. Actual awareness. The key is to notice that the awareness is not an object. Every time you try to look at it, it is the looking. It is never what you are looking at. It is always what you are looking from. You cannot get outside awareness to observe it because there is no outside. Everything is inside it. When this becomes clear, not as idea but as direct recognition, you have reached the threshold of the Gnostic gnosis. You have recognized that you are not located in the body. The body is located in you, in the infinite awareness you are. At this point, the practice shifts from effort to allowing. You're no longer trying to achieve a state. You are simply resting as the awareness you have recognized yourself to be. The Valentinians called this standing in the pleroma. The Sethians called it entering the silence. Ramana called it abiding in the self. Same recognition. You are the infinite, eternal, unchanging awareness in which all experience appears. Now here is where the practice gets subtle, and where most traditions diverge in their instructions. Once you recognize yourself as awareness, what do? Some traditions say rest in emptiness, in the void, in the witness consciousness. But the Gnostic teaching goes further. It says that awareness is not empty. It is full. It is the pleroma, the totality, the fullness of divine reality. And that fullness is not somewhere else. It is what awareness actually is when you stop overlaying concepts on it. The Gospel of Truth teaches the totality went about searching for the one from whom they had come forth, and the totality was inside of him, the incomprehensible, inconceivable one who is superior to every thought. The totality, the pleroma, is inside the monad, and the monad is the awareness you are. To recognize this, you move to the third stage of practice, resting in the ground. Once you're established as awareness, you stop all investigation, you stop all effort, you simply rest. And in that resting, the nature of awareness begins to reveal itself, not because you are making something happen, because you have stopped obscuring what has always been happening. The awareness is not neutral emptiness, it is vibrant aliveness. It is the source from which thoughts arise. It is the source from which emotions arise. It is the source from which the entire manifest world arises moment by moment. And that source is not separate from you. It is what you are when there is no you claiming to be anything. The pistis Sophia describes this recognition through Sophia's redemption. After all her struggles, after all her crying out to the light, she stops. She ceases effort. And in that cessation, she recognizes, I am light. I have always been light. The chaos I am trapped in is not my nature. It is just the temporary condition of having forgotten what I am. And the moment she recognizes that, correction begins. Not because external God intervenes, because recognition itself dissolves the illusion of separation. This is the mechanism. You're not trying to become the monad. You're recognizing you've always been the monad, expressing itself through temporary limitation as individual consciousness, and that limitation was never actually real. It was only believed. Let me give you the obstacles you will encounter when you practice this, because knowing them in advance allows you to work with them instead of being derailed by them. Obstacle 1: conceptualization. Your mind will try to turn awareness into an object, into an idea you hold. You will start thinking about awareness instead of being awareness. When this happens, you will know because the practice will feel abstract, distant, like you're trying to understand something instead of recognizing something. The correction is simple. Stop thinking and start noticing. Do not think about awareness. Notice the awareness that is here right now. The awareness reading these words, not a concept, the actual presence of knowing. Obstacle 2: subtle seeking. Even after you recognize awareness, part of the mind will continue seeking, trying to get more awareness, deeper recognition, better meditation. This is the ego structure trying to reclaim control. It wants to turn recognition into achievement, into something you do successfully. The correction is recognizing that awareness is already complete. It is not improved by your efforts. It is only obscured by the belief that it needs improvement. You're not trying to become more aware. You're noticing that awareness is already fully present. Obstacle 3: re-identification. You will have the recognition, you will rest as awareness, and then something will happen in daily life and suddenly you're back in identification with thought, with emotion, with the body-mind. You will feel like you lost the recognition. This is normal. Recognition is not a permanent state you achieve once and maintain forever. It is a seeing that needs to be refreshed moment by moment until it becomes so familiar that it is your default mode. When re-identification happens, do not judge it. Do not make it mean you failed. Just notice. There is identification happening. There is believing I am this body-mind again, and gently return attention to the awareness that is noticing the identification. Obstacle 4: fear of dissolution. When recognition deepens, when you start to realize that the individual you think you are is not what you actually are, fear can arise. The ego structure senses its own dissolution and creates panic. If I am not this person, what am I? Will I disappear? Will I lose everything? This fear is the final guardian before full recognition. The way through it is to see that what you are afraid of losing is exactly what is causing your suffering. The limited individual self is not being destroyed. It is being recognized as a temporary appearance in something much vaster. You're not losing yourself. You are finding what you actually are. Now let me show you the 30-day practice progression that will take you from basic awareness training to direct recognition of the monad. This is synthesized from Valentinian instructions preserved in the Gospel of Philip, from Sethian practices described in the Trimorphic Protanoia, and from modern Advaita self-inquiry methodology. Days 1 through 7. Basic witnessing practice. 20 minutes daily. Sit. Close eyes. Notice thoughts appearing. Notice the space they appear in. Notice you are the space. That is all. Do not try to achieve any special state. Just develop the basic capacity to distinguish between thoughts and awareness. Days 8 through 14. Investigating awareness. 20 minutes daily. After settling into witnessing, ask, what is aware? And look at the awareness itself. Notice it has no location, no boundaries, no characteristics you can grasp. Notice it is not an object. It is the knowing of objects. Days 15 through 21. Collapsing the witness. 20 minutes daily. Once awareness is recognized, look for who is aware of awareness. Try to find the awareness of awareness. Notice there is no second awareness. There is only awareness. Let the sense of being a separate witness dissolve. Rest as seamless knowing. Days 22 through 30. Resting in the ground. 20 minutes daily. No technique now, no effort. Just rest as the awareness you have recognized. Allow its nature to reveal itself. Notice it is not empty. It is vibrant, alive, the source from which all experience emanates. Notice you're not in it. It is what you are. After 30 days, the practice is no longer something you do for 20 minutes. It becomes a recognition you return to throughout the day. Walking, working, eating, talking, you remember, I am not this body. I am the awareness this body appears in. I am not these thoughts. I am the awareness these thoughts appear in. I am not this individual. I am the monad recognizing itself through this temporary expression. And each time you remember, the identification weakens and the recognition strengthens until resting, as awareness becomes more natural than believing you are the limited self. The neuroscience research on meditation practices gives us insight into what is happening physiologically during this recognition. Studies on long-term meditators show decreased activity in the default mode network, the brain network associated with self-referential thinking, and the sense of being a separate individual. They show increased activity in the salience network, associated with present moment awareness. They show changes in the posterior cingulate cortex, the region associated with the sense of self. What the Gnostics called recognition of the monad, neuroscience describes as deactivation of the neural correlates of the self construct. The sense of being a separate individual is not metaphysically real. It is a brain-generated construct, and when that construct quiets, what remains is awareness itself, which has always been here but has been obscured by constant self-referential thinking. But neuroscience can only measure correlates. It cannot explain why awareness exists at all. It cannot explain the hard problem of consciousness, why there is subjective experience instead of just objective information processing. And this is where the Gnostic cosmology provides a framework that pure materialism cannot. The monad emanates the pleroma, the fullness of divine consciousness. Within the pleroma arise the aeons, different qualities and expressions of consciousness. From the aeons arises Sophia, who through her desire to know the Father creates the demiurge. The demiurge, not knowing the monad, believes himself to be the ultimate God and creates the material world. But even this material world is not separate from the monad. It is a distorted expression of divine consciousness, and every individual consciousness contains within it the divine spark, the pneuma, which is the monad itself. You are that spark, not a fragment of the monad itself, experiencing limitation through identification with matter, and the practice Jesus taught is the way the monad wakes up to itself, not you waking up. The monad waking up through the vehicle of your individual consciousness. This is why the Gnostics were not afraid of the archons, the lower powers that control matter and the reincarnation cycle. The archons have power over the body, over thought, over emotion. But they have no power over awareness itself, because awareness is what they appear in. They are objects in consciousness, and an object cannot control the space it appears in. When you recognize yourself as awareness, as the monad, archonic influence dissolves, not because you fight it, because you are no longer identified with what it can control. It can control thoughts. You're not thoughts. It can control emotions. You're not emotions. It can control the body. You're not the body. You're the infinite awareness in which all of that appears, and from that recognition, everything changes, not the external circumstances of your life. Those continue as they continue, but your relationship to those circumstances transforms completely. You're no longer trying to escape them. You're no longer imprisoned by them. You recognize they are appearances in the infinite freedom you are. The practical implications of this recognition extend into every domain of life. Suffering does not disappear, but your relationship to suffering changes. Pain appears in awareness, but the awareness is not pained. Grief appears in awareness, but the awareness is not grieved. The emotions are felt fully, but they are no longer believed to be what you are. You are the space they appear in, and that space is never touched by what appears in it. Decision-making transforms because you are no longer making decisions from fear, from desire, from the need to protect the limited individual. You're making decisions from clarity, from the recognition of what serves the totality. Relationships transform because you are no longer relating from need, from the desire to get something from others. You're relating from fullness, from the recognition that the awareness in others is the same awareness in you. There is no separation. We are the monad recognizing itself through infinite expressions. Death loses its power because you recognize you were never born. The body was born, the personality was born, but the awareness, the I am, has always been here. It existed before this lifetime. It will exist after this lifetime. Not as individual soul reincarnating, as the infinite monad that is beyond birth and death entirely. The fear of death is fear of losing the individual self. When you recognize the individual self is not what you are, there is nothing to lose. What you are cannot die because it was never born. It is the eternal background against which birth and death appear. Now let me address the question many people have when they encounter this teaching. If I am the monad, if I am infinite awareness, why do I not feel like it? Why does it seem like I am just this limited person struggling through life? The answer is identification. Identification is the mechanism by which infinite awareness appears to become limited individual consciousness. The monad, for reasons the texts do not fully explain, expresses itself through limitation. It takes the perspective of the individual, and in taking that perspective, it forgets its infinite nature. This is what the Gnostics meant when they said the divine spark is trapped in matter. Not that the spark is actually trapped, that it believes it is trapped because it is identified with the body-mind. The Gospel of Truth describes this with the metaphor of nightmare. It was like a nightmare in which one is fleeing though there is nowhere to flee to, or pursuing though there is no one to pursue, or giving blows in a fight though there is no one to fight, or they are being pursued though there is no pursuer. Or sometimes it is as if people are murdering others, though there is no one being murdered, or as if they were killing their neighbours, for they have been stained by their blood. When those who are going through all these things wake up, they see nothing. Those who are in the midst of all these disturbances, for they are nothing. Such is the way of those who have cast ignorance from them like sleep, not considering it to be anything. The limited individual, the one who suffers, the one who seeks, the one who is afraid, is like a character in a nightmare. It seems completely real while you're identified with it, but when you wake up, when you recognize yourself as awareness, you see that the character was never real. It was a temporary appearance in consciousness, and all the suffering, all the seeking, all the fear belonged to the character, not to the awareness. The awareness was always free, always infinite, always the monad. It just forgot for a while by taking itself to be the limited appearance. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not denying that suffering happens. Suffering happens. The body experiences pain. The mind experiences anguish. Terrible things occur in the material world. The Gnostic teaching does not deny any of that. It says that suffering is real for the character, for the identified individual. But you are not that. You are what the character appears in. And from that recognition, compassion arises naturally. Not the compassion of I should feel bad for others. The compassion of recognizing that others are the same monad you are, caught in the same dream of separation, and anything you can do to wake them up is service to your own true nature. The question of ethics arises here. If I am infinite awareness, if nothing can ultimately touch me, why should I care about anything? Why not just abandon all responsibility and rest in awareness? The Gnostics addressed this directly. The Gospel of Philip teaches, "Those who have put on the perfect light cannot be seen by the powers, nor can they be detained. One will put on this light sacramentally in the union. If the woman had not separated from the man, she would not die with the man. His separation became the beginning of death. Because of this, Christ came to repair the separation which was from the beginning, and again unite the two, and to give life to those who died as a result of the separation and unite them." The separation the text describes is not gender separation. It is the separation of consciousness from its source, the identification with limitation that creates the illusion of death. And Christ's function, the function of the teacher who transmits recognition, is to repair that separation by revealing it never actually happened. You were never separate. You only believed you were, and belief in separation is what creates all suffering, all violence, all cruelty, all exploitation. When separation dissolves, when you recognize yourself as the monad in all beings, harm becomes impossible. How can you harm yourself? You would only harm others when you believe they're separate from you. When you recognize they are you, harm ceases naturally. So the ethical life arises from recognition, not from rule following. You do not refrain from harm because a commandment says not to. You refrain from harm because you see there is no one to harm. There is only the monad appearing as multiplicity. And the monad does not attack itself. It recognizes itself everywhere and acts from that recognition. This is what the Valentinians meant when they said Gnostics are above the law. Not that they behave immorally, that they behave from a recognition deeper than morality. They do not need rules to tell them how to act. They see clearly, and right action arises spontaneously from that seeing. The integration of this recognition into daily life is gradual. You do not have one glimpse of the monad and suddenly live as a fully enlightened being. You have the recognition, you lose it, you return to identification, you remember again, you forget again. This cycle continues for months, for years, until the recognition becomes stable. The Gnostic texts describe this as a process of repeated anamnesis, remembering. You remember what you are, you forget, you remember again. And each time you remember, the pathways of identification weaken and the pathways of recognition strengthen. Eventually, recognition becomes primary. You still experience thoughts, emotions, sensations, but you're no longer convinced they are what you are. You know yourself as the awareness they appear in, and that knowing does not waver. Let me give you the advanced practices that accelerate this stabilization. These come from the later Valentinian schools and from parallel traditions in Kashmir Shaivism and Dzogchen Buddhism that preserve the same recognition techniques. Advanced Practice 1. Recognition in action. Instead of only practicing in formal sitting, you bring the recognition into activity. While walking, notice you are awareness, not the body walking. While eating, notice you are awareness, not the body eating. While talking, notice you are awareness, not the person talking. This is extremely difficult at first because activity pulls you into identification. but with practice you can maintain recognition even while fully engaged in the world. The Valentinians called this being in the world but not of the world. Advanced practice 2, recognition in emotion. When strong emotion arises, fear, anger, grief, desire, instead of being swept away by it or trying to suppress it, you turn attention to the awareness the emotion is appearing in. You notice, there is fear, but I am not the fear. I am what the fear is appearing to. And you rest as that awareness while the emotion moves through. This does not make the emotion disappear. It changes your relationship to it. You are no longer the frightened one. You are the space in which fear appears, and from that space you can respond instead of react. You can feel the fear fully without being controlled by it. Advanced practice 3, recognition in confusion. When you do not know what to do, when you are lost, when nothing makes sense, instead of seeking answers from thought, you rest as awareness. You notice that confusion is just another appearance, and in that resting, clarity arises naturally, not because you figured something out, because when the mind stops generating confusion, what remains is clear seeing. The monad is intelligence itself. When you rest as the monad, intelligence operates without the interference of fear-based thinking. Decisions become obvious, actions become spontaneous. You stop trying to control life and start flowing with what is. Advanced practice 4, transmission. Once the recognition is stable in you, you can transmit it to others, not by teaching, not by explaining, simply by being. When you rest as awareness, others feel it. They do not know what they are feeling, but they sense something different. And that sensing can trigger their own recognition. This is what the Gnostics meant by pneumatic transmission. The divine spark recognizes itself across apparently separate individuals. You meet someone who is resting as the monad, and something in you lights up because it recognizes itself in them. This is how the teaching spreads, not through conversion, through resonance, the monad calling to itself across the dream of separation. The long-term trajectory of this practice is not what most people expect. You do not transcend into some cosmic consciousness and leave the body behind. You do not gain supernatural powers. You do not become enlightened in the sense of being special or elevated above others. What happens is much simpler and much more profound. You become ordinary. You stop seeking. You stop trying to be something other than what you are. You recognize that what you are is already the totality, already the monad, already infinite and complete. And from that recognition, you simply live, not as someone who has attained something, as someone who has stopped believing they lacked anything. The Pistis Sophia describes the endpoint of Sophia's journey. When she'd received the first mystery, she recognized that she had come forth from the chaos and was in the treasure of the light, and she knew that the region of the chaos was no region of the light. And all the mysteries which are in the chaos knew that the light was their father and they were its children. You recognize you have always been in the light. The chaos, the suffering, the seeking, the entire drama of spiritual evolution was happening within the light, never outside it. And all the forces you thought were opposing you, all the archons, all the obstacles, they too are within the light. They are expressions of the monad playing the game of forgetting and remembering. This does not mean suffering does not matter. It means suffering is understood in a different context. It is the monad experiencing what it is like to believe itself limited. And when that experience has been fully known, the monad recognizes itself again, and the dream ends. Not that the world ends, that your identification with being a separate individual in the world ends. You continue to function, to work, to relate, to live, but you are no longer convinced you are the one doing any of it. You are the awareness in which it all appears. The final section of the Gospel of Truth describes this completion. This is the gospel of the one who is searched for, which he revealed to those who are perfect through the mercies of the Father as the hidden mystery, Jesus the Christ. Through it, he enlightened those who were in darkness because of forgetfulness. He enlightened them and gave them a path, and that path is the truth which he taught them. For this reason, error was angry with him, so it persecuted him. It was distressed by him, so it made him powerless. He was nailed to a tree. He became a fruit of the knowledge of the Father. It did not, however, cause destruction because it was eaten. Rather, to those who ate it, it gave the possibility that whoever he discovered in himself might become joyful in the discovery of him. Jesus revealed the path. The path is truth. Truth is recognition of the monad as your own fundamental nature. This made error angry. Error is identification with limitation, with separation, with the belief that you are the body-mind. And error tried to destroy the teaching by killing Jesus. But you cannot kill truth. You cannot destroy recognition. It simply waits to be rediscovered. And when you discover it in yourself, you become joyful. Not because you gained something, because you recognized what you have always been. The kingdom of heaven is within you, not metaphorically, actually, literally, right now. The infinite awareness reading these words is the monad itself. You are not in the kingdom. You are the kingdom. You have always been the kingdom. You only forgot by believing you were the temporary limited expression appearing in that infinite awareness. And the practice Jesus taught, preserved by the Gnostics, transmitted across 2,000 years, is simply the method for remembering, not learning something new, remembering what has always been true. This is why the teaching could never actually be suppressed. You can burn the texts, you can kill the teachers, you can exile the communities, but you cannot destroy the truth of what people are. And as long as there is even one person who remembers, who recognizes, who rests as the monad, the teaching lives. Because the teaching is not information, it is recognition. And recognition spreads through contact, through transmission, through the simple fact of being in the presence of someone who has stopped seeking and started being what they are. You are that now, whether you recognize it or not, whether you believe it or not. The awareness reading these words is the monad. It has always been the monad. It will always be the monad. The only question is whether you will continue believing you are the limited individual appearing in that awareness, or whether you will recognize what you actually are and rest as that. The choice is not between good and evil, between salvation and damnation, between heaven and hell. The choice is between identification and recognition, between believing the dream and waking up to what is dreaming. Jesus gave you the coordinates. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The Gnostics preserved the map. The practice is available right now. The only thing required is for you to stop seeking and start looking, not at the contents of your experience, at the awareness experiencing, not at thoughts, at what is aware of thoughts, not at the body, at what is aware of the body. And when you look there, when you actually place attention on awareness itself instead of the objects appearing in awareness, you will discover what the Gnostics discovered, what Jesus taught, what every mystic in history has recognized. You are not the limited individual. You are the infinite monad recognizing itself through temporary limitation. You are not in the kingdom. You are the kingdom. You have always been the kingdom. You are just looking in the wrong direction. The practice begins now, not tomorrow, not after you understand more, not after you become more spiritual. Now. Place attention on the awareness that is here, the presence that is reading these words, not a thought about awareness, the awareness itself, and notice it has no boundaries. Notice it is not located anywhere. Notice everything you have ever experienced appears in it, but it is not any of those things, it is what they appear to. And that awareness, that I am, that presence, is the monad. This is the location code. This is what Jesus revealed. This is what the Gnostics preserved. This is what you are.